Hello, this is Mary Middlestat. Oops, excuse me here. Start out diggling. And I am with Design and Be Merry, and this video is going to deal with a way to couch down beads so that you can add more than one bead at a time. And if you see on some of my work here, let me get it a little bit closer. And you can see that I'm adding these nifty little 3-bead buds, whatever you want to call them, just a accent to the stitching around this mat that I have. And we're going to talk about how to do that and give you another skill to add to your woolwork. Anyways, in keeping with my usual process, a few things about materials. We are using Japanese beads. I'm using Japanese size 11 beads. It's important that you use Japanese beads because they have larger holes, flatter surfaces, and particularly if you want to use the Valdani size 12 pearl cotton. Here's the example of the pearl cotton. I like Valdani. It's color fast and it works very well, and that goes with the embroidery Redwood size 9 needle from Jenna Kimball's Foxglove Cottage. It's a nice long needle with a sharp point, and it's got a nice slender head, so it slides through the beads very nicely. You might find a sewing needle that works, but it's hard to find one with the same size head, and I have just found that this needle, I have no problem ever with it sticking or gunking. They are my go-to needle, and I can do all the rest of my embroidery as well with them. That is if you're using this. If you want, you can also, if you have some beading experience or beading thread at home, you can use a thread called silamide. You may have seen this in my other videos. It is a very strong thread, and you can just buy a couple cards. I think the cards are like $2 a piece, and there's like, one has 100 yards, but otherwise they have about 40 yards, which is plenty to go. You can buy it in a spool, but that would be only if you probably were going to do a lot of beading because there's 900 yards on it. But anyways, this works very well. You use this in a beading needle, however. So if you have some experience with beading or have some beading supplies and are comfortable with that, that works great. And this will also allow you to use check glass, which is got smaller holes, and it is much more difficult. You could not get the Jenna Kimball needle through a size 11 check bead, generally speaking. And this goes with a beading needle, and I use a size 10 beading needle. You can sometimes, stores will sell you individual ones. It's a long, slender needle. It's very nice to work with. You don't have to force it or bend it. John James makes them by the package, but quite often the stores will sell just a couple at a time. And you may have one in with, sometimes they come in those sewing kits where they give you an assortment for your home. But anyways, I'm really excited about introducing the Jenna Kimball and the pearl cotton because that's what many of you have, and some of you who don't live with easy access to materials, it becomes a real chore to do that. Anyways, the other thing that we're going to do is you're going to, with your wool, you're going to need to use fusible. And I've got the paper here. You can see the fusible on the back. The fusible does a lot of things for you. One, it'll trap all the threads in the end, but it also gives you a really nice firm surface where the threads do not pull together. And it may seem a little strange at first, and if you've got the wrong needle, you could have some sticking. There is absolutely no sticking with the Jenna Kimball. I've also heard that some people say that a lot of people don't steam it hard enough to get the fusible on the back. But anyways, it'll keep your wool in shape, and you can do all these things and add to the accents. The downside is that it will make it slightly firmer. So for mats and wall hangings and those types of things, it's fine. If you were trying to apply these to garment wear, you might have to look into some different types of interfacings, maybe a woven interfacing, and then you would have to be very careful about how you pull your thread on the back so that it doesn't pucker up. But let's get going on the little piece. Now, like the sample I showed you, I had been embroidering a little piece, and I ended the line. And in order to do one of those little flowers, and couch it down. And I want to explain that couching is a method of having the beads on one thread and then sewing another thread, sewing the thread that is in the beads down. And that's what holds the beads to the surface. So we're going to pick up, I'm going to pick up one bead here. And I'm going to go down just 32nd or so, just the width of the bead. And I'm going to go through that bead twice. Let me get back on the screen here. I'm going to try and, there. Sorry for the shaking. Anyways, so I go through the bead twice. Now I'm going to come up right next to the bead. And you can pick up any number of beads that you want. You can pick up 3, 4, 5, whatever, however you want them to look. It doesn't make any difference. And you can kind of experiment with your hand. You can kind of go around and see how this fits around your thing to get an idea how many beads you want. You could actually go all the way around. Once you have an idea, put your needle down approximately where the other end is. And the pearl cotton is very forgiving. Okay, so you see me, I've gone down, and I'm going to hold my thumb there, and that's going to kind of curl around, but it won't lay down. You notice that it pops up? It's just kind of wobbling back and forth. Okay, so I hold the thread from the back. Make sure you hold the thread with your finger. And you're going to come up right in between the first two blue beads. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go down in between, over the thread that is in between those two beads. Make sure you're over the thread and pull it down snug. And you'll see that it starts to make the beads adhere and lay down. Come up again between the next two beads and go down. I kind of aim my needle in a little bit. Coming up again, and like you say, you can see that I'm aiming my needle in towards the side. And one last time, in between the two. And there you go. You have a nice little flower. I can stitch that. The nice thing about this is, if you notice, I'm actually doing the vine the same thread that I'm doing the flower. You do see a very small amount of the white thread. If that's bothersome, you can obviously, I'll show you later, you can obviously just stop with the white thread, leave all the ends, and go back and do each little accent with a matching colored thread. But usually I don't find this an issue. And I'm going to do another one here so that if you didn't catch the first one. So we go through. I'm going to come up. I'm going to grab a bead. And I'm going to go through that bead twice. And that'll make it sit very nice. And then I'm going to come up, and this time I'll make a bud with, well, I'll make it the same. I'll do the next one. Let's see, we did 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And you're going to go down. Hold it in the back so that you hold it tight. Now, the one thing that's kind of a caveat about that is usually good couching involves 2 threads, one that carries the bead and one that goes over and sews it down. Obviously, in this case, it's all 1 thread. And for this purpose, that works. But most of the work, if you ever look at native, American beadwork, they did use 2 threads. Again, you can see you just stitch in between each bead. You put one piece of thread, pull it through, and then tie it off. And when you're all done with your piece, again, slide this in between the fusible for about 1/4 of an inch and just clip it. That will be sealed. And there you have your little floral. And you can use that process for almost anything. Now, up in this other corner, I'm going to show you what to do in case you don't want to have that thread showing. And I'm going to do it with the beading thread. Obviously, you can do this also with the embroidery thread, but I thought I'd show you some of the beading. Make sure you make a big lumpy knot, because you want a single roll-off knot is not going to be enough usually for wool to hold on. Okay, in this case, if you've made your vine or your design and you just want to add on, you're going to kind of do some of the same things. You're going to pick up a bead and you're going to go down. And then you're going to come up, and this time I'm just going to pick up 3 beads, just to show you that you don't have to have, you can have fun with these motives. They don't have to be, quote, real. And you can take a stab, an estimate of where. And I am using the beading thread now that blends in with the background, so you will see nothing. Again, you hold it the same way, and you simply go down. This time you only have 2 places, one between those 2 beads. And sometimes you have to guide it a little bit. 2 beads wants to sit together instead of having the thread in between them. But there you go. And by tugging it, the beads kind of sink into the wool. And so you can give it a little tug. You can also see what this looks like on the back. And here's the back of the previous one. So it doesn't make any difference. It can be kind of a little messy. Now, the other way of couching is, I'm going to show you here. You can couch a short length or you can couch a long length. The long length involves 2 threads. You're not going to get away with 1 thread. To couch just a few, I will show you. You can add probably about 3 or 4 beads. And the reason for this is that when you couch more beads, for some reason the couching thread, the thread that goes in between, takes up space. And if you think you can measure, because now like here, I can measure this, and I can say, okay, oops, let me get this here. I'm going to move my beads. I can measure this. I can hold it down and I can say, okay, I want to go down about there. Oops, that was off screen. You can see that I was holding it here, and you can kind of guess how far to take your needle down in. And again, much like you went around the top flower, you simply start and go back, and you won't have any problem. But you can only do this for about 3 to 4 beads. Beyond that, you really need, oops, excuse me here, keep getting off camera. Again, go in between each bead. And you'll notice you don't see any threads at all. Always use, again, a reminder, always use a thread, if possible, that matches your wool if you want it to be hidden. So anyway, so that's now all held down, and you can tie a knot. Now what happens when you want to have a longer number of beads? Excuse me here, I'm trying to get a knot tied off screen, and I'll show you how that goes. Okay, now if you look at, well, let's see if I find it here. Okay, if we look at this, we see a longer length, and you're thinking, okay, I would like to do a longer length, and you can string quite a few beads on your strand, but you're going to need a second thread to work with. I can't explain what happens. All I know is that I learned from a native, and they said, yeah, by the time you start putting those threads in between, they end up, the length ends up growing. So if I were to just go like this, I would find that by the end that this bead wouldn't fit and it would bubble up. So we don't want that to happen. So let's say that I'm going to hold this, and everybody's got their own technique of how to hold this strand tight. And I'm going to take a second thread. In this case, I'm going to use the pearl cotton. And it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of difference. So what you do is you hold the beads down against the pressure. I've got to kind of hold, the thread is held in my hand. And I'm going to come up and go down between the first two. And I'm going to go up between the second two. Okay, I guess I need to pull that one up first. And pull up the knot from the back. Okay, if it's doing this type of thing, just push the thread down in between where you want it to go. The other thing you can do is, with a little bit of dexterity, you can actually bend your line of stitching when you do this. You can just make sure you're covering over each, in between each bead, or each of the two beads, that you're going over the thread that is carrying the beads. Another advantage of doing this system is that you can actually use two different colors of threads. If you have a white bead and you wouldn't put a black thread, but let's say you're sewing white beads on black felt, you could put a white thread through the beads, which would keep them nice and white, and then you could use a black thread to couch them down. Oops. Okay. I want to get a knot there. And as you can see, I can actually bend this line so that I can make it curve. And I think I'm going to have to make it curve a lot, because otherwise it would hit the edge. Again, I always aim my needle a little bit. When I come up, I come up almost between the beads. And then when I go down, if you notice, I'm aiming my needle kind of so that it's over the thread, but it goes towards the center. It makes it less visible. Now at this point, I have all my beads sewn on, so I come back and I take this one and I simply go through, and I can knot off that thread, and I would tie a couple knots actually if this were permanent, and trim it off. And the same with the couching thread. You tie that off, and you proceed to slide your needle in between the fusible and the wool, trim it off, and there you go. And you know, you'll get different results. It does take some practice to do the longer two-thread couching. Here's a straighter line, here's one curved, but it can certainly add some beautiful accents and in any of your wool work. Anyways, I hope that you will enjoy. Oh, by the way, if I didn't show you, the fusible on this one is still pretty good shape. It may get real crinkly, and that's okay. It still will function later on when you put the backing on it, and all the threads will be nicely fused in place, and you're ready to go. Well, I hope I've given you some other beading technique that you can now use on your wool work. And if you want to see more of my work and how I've used beads in my work, go to www.designandbemerry.com. You have a great day and have fun stitching. Thank you.